It's an age-old question, who am I? And how you answer it can take many forms. For Cecilia Paris, it will mean a trip deep into the world of genetics, a quest to the other side of the earth.
We are traveling from Masa to Vina.
And a journey into the world of the slave trade.
I didn't see that one coming at all. It's a shocker.
Cecilia Paris searches for her roots on Ancestors in the Attic. You got any secrets in your family tree? Were your ancestors sinners or saints? Were they royal or rogues? Let's dig up some dirt. Let's dig into your family history and discover the ancestors in your attic. Hello, welcome to Ancestors in the Attic and a story about the ties that bind us all. Cecilia Paris has a gaping hole in her family. She knows nothing about her father and therefore next to nothing about her family tree. But growing up, she heard stories, rumors that her ancestors were slaves. Now Cecilia is about to undertake a journey that will carry her thousands of miles from home. A journey that will carry her into one of the darkest chapters in human history. Her hope to find the roots that have always eluded her. 3 times a month, Cecilia Paris sings in a gospel choir, enjoying the fellowship of voices raised together in song. Perhaps the harmony here makes up for some of the discord in her family life. When Cecilia was just a teenager, she made a dramatic discovery.
When I was 15, I found out that the man that my mother married was not my father.
Despite Cecilia's pleas, her mother refused to tell her anything.
My mother doesn't talk to me about my biological father. This is a major issue for me as I get older. So it pulls me away from her, and like right now we just don't speak.
Cut off from one parent, estranged from the other, Cecilia did the only thing she could. She dug into her past. Although she was born in England and raised in Canada, her family comes from St. Vincent in the Caribbean. For years she's wondered whether her ancestors were slaves, but could only trace her tree back to her grandparents. Now, as her children grow older, the need to know where she comes from is pressing.
Like the more that I find out, I'm certain the more information that I find out, the more grounded I'm going to feel, the more stronger I'm going to feel about myself. And I hope that the information that I get will have the same effect on my daughters as well.
To find out where Cecilia is from and whether she is descended from slaves, I'm going to start with the Methodist Church archives, because they were among the first to embrace and baptize freed slaves. I had a researcher in St. Vincent dig them up for me, and now I'm on my way to the University of Toronto to look at them. Using the records of the Methodist Church, I was able to trace Cecilia's family on the island back to her great-great-grandparents, Chance and Maria, born in the 1810s. That timeline fits with the history. Slavery existed on St. Vincent from 1796, when the British defeated the Carib natives, to 1833, when it was finally abolished. So it's possible Cecilia's ancestors were slaves. My first clue is that Chance and Maria do appear in the Methodist archives. Now, if I'm lucky, I'll get the hard proof we really need from actual plantation records. Well, it was a bit of a long shot. In what few documents we were able to uncover, there's no reference to a Chance or a Maria. You see, in most of these documents, the slaves are identified either by numbers or occasionally by first name. After all, they were considered chattel.
Going through the records in St. Vincent, we managed to get back to the 1800s, actually back to your great-great-grandparents.
Wow.
Get that?
But these are names I'd never heard of before. I only know up to here. All of these are in St. Vincent. Wow. This is crazy.
Now, the other thing we were hoping to do was find some direct connection between Africa and St. Vincent. So what we did was we went through the slave records. But unfortunately, as you can see, they're really not very detailed, so we didn't really learn much.
With no living descendants on St. Vincent, Cecilia's search seems to have come to a dead end. But, Cecilia, there is one other path that we can take to find your past, and that path is DNA.
Okay.
A simple swab of her cheek, and I am off to uncover Cecilia's genetic identity. I've brought Cecilia's DNA sample down here to Utah to Sorensen Genomics. They do the lab work for African Ancestry, a US-based company that helps people find their African roots through DNA. The lab extracts and sequences a very specific part of Cecilia's genetic code called mitochondrial DNA. This is DNA that is inherited only from the mother, and it's passed on mother to child for hundreds of generations without changing. So, Cecilia has the same mitochondrial DNA as her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, and so on, right back to, perhaps, Africa. Once the DNA has been sequenced, the results are sent here, to Washington, to Dr. Rick Kittles, the brains behind African Ancestry. How many samples are in your database?
So we have over 25,000 samples in our database. They represent individuals from over 500 different locations and ethnic groups in the continent of Africa. We paid special attention to Western Central Africa because the historians and the anthropologists said this is an area where 95% of the enslaved Africans came from. So we had to make sure that they were well represented in the database.
Now, can we see if we have a match here for Cecilia?
Sure. So, here we go.
Which one? This is it?
Yep, that's it right there.
That's amazing. We took your sample, and we compared it with literally thousands of samples from all over Europe and North America and Africa. And we have a match.
Really?
Yeah. Now, according to African Ancestry, Cecilia Paris, being you, shares maternal genetic ancestry with the Masa and Fulani peoples living in Cameroon.
Wow.
That's it.
It's beautiful. Wow.
Right.
I am thrilled.
Well, we want you to be familiar with where you're from. So in order to give this some context, you and I are going to go to Cameroon.
No. Are you kidding?
We're going to go to Cameroon. We're going to go to Africa. And we're going to see where your ancestors lived. You okay?
I'm very happy.
Yeah. What a discovery. Okay, so Cecilia now knows that the DNA of two African groups, the Fulani and the Masa, are embedded in her genetic code. When we return, Cecilia Paris is off to Cameroon. Growing up, Cecilia Paris heard stories that her ancestors were slaves shipped to the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. Now, thanks to the science of DNA analysis, she knows that this is true. Her next stop, the home of her ancestors, the West African country of Cameroon. After a long flight halfway across the world, Cecilia finds herself in her genetic homeland. Welcome to Cameroon.
I can't believe it. a whole new part of my life, and I want to learn more.
Our journey begins in Douala, a big port city where things like cocoa, coffee, and cotton are exported. While there aren't any reminders of it today, from 1760 to 1840, Douala did big business in the slave trade. Routes far inland led thousands of people to traders waiting here at this coast. It's estimated that 11 million people were taken out of Africa over 400 years. The workforce for the new European empires expanding across the Americas. About 4 million of those people ended up in the Caribbean. Now one of their descendants is tracing her way back.
How did the slave trade work? Did the Europeans just come in here in their big boats, go inland, grab people, take them away to West Indies and North America?
I arranged for Cecilia to meet at the port with Dr. Stephen Foman, a professor of history at the National University.
The Europeans never went into the hinterlands to get slaves. They remained in their ships at the ocean. And African traders brought them down to the coast.
But it's Foman's next revelation about Cecilia's Fulani and Masa roots that takes her by surprise.
The raiders were the Fulanis. Those were the main raiders.
Right.
And the victims were often the Masas.
Cecilia, it seems, is descended from both slaver and slave.
Through DNA, I've been linked to both the Fulani and Masa tribe, right? So how do you think that would come to be?
There is a possibility that there could be intermarriage between the Masas and the Fulani, because some of the Fulani took some Masas as concubines.
It's a lot, yeah.
Very pleased to meet you.
From Douala, our plan is to follow the old slave route from the coast to the far north province where the Masa live. To help us get there, we found ourselves a guide, Datwang Jusu. He's an anthropology student, but more importantly, he's Masa. It's his village we're going to.
We are traveling from Mawa to Vina.
Beginning in the 18th century, the Fulani raiders roamed this area on horseback searching for human slaves. Thousands upon thousands of Africans, Masa included, were taken from their homes, separated from their families, and shipped downstream in chains to the European traders at the coast. Those who survived that harrowing journey were eventually sent overseas to work themselves to death. For Cecilia, her link to the Fulani raiders is difficult to reconcile.
That they were slave traders, I didn't see that one coming at all. It's a shocker.
Just Fulani or just Masa, it would have been less complicated to think about, but still painful.
It's about 900 punishing kilometers from Douala to Datwang's Masa village, and one hell of a rough ride. This is about as far off the beaten track as you can get. The beginning of the rainy season doesn't help matters. Lucky for us, some of the villagers come to meet us and give us a hand. Word travels ahead that Cecilia is here, and a Masa welcome awaits her when we arrive.
I just felt wonderful. I felt joy. I felt excitement, a lot of curiosity, because I have a lot of questions.
These are Masa people, and somehow through the twists and turns of history and in their twisted strands of DNA, Cecilia is descended from them. Tomorrow the welcome celebration will take place, a reunion that is literally hundreds of years in the making.